I was going to start with a comment that this is an area of considerable sensitivity. And just as Christine has referred, it really requires, in many, many cases, one-on-one conversations. We can't generalize here today about what is permissible and what is not permissible. We can only provide certain guideposts and certain approaches to improve the chances of a successful transaction. Now, you won't be surprised to hear this. Canada largely follows the CFIUS regime in Canada. A few years ago, in the I would call the more positive M&A relationship between two countries, most investments were regulated under a net benefit test, which means, was the acquisition good for Canada? Were the employees going to be kept? Was the office going to be there? Will there be an exchange listing? So when you think of CNOC's acquisition of Nexen a few years ago in the oil sands space, which was a very pivotal transaction under Stephen Harper's regime, which was allowed to proceed, that transaction was vetted under net benefit. Then all of a sudden, Canada looked at what's happening south of the border with CFIUS, which is focused on national security, and said, I think maybe we should start to think about that. And so Canada has aligned itself with the US on CFIUS. And the reason I want to share with you that perhaps is not well known is Canadian businesses really want to be able to invest in the US. And if they're going to invest in the US wants to know that Canada has a similar type of regime itself when it brings foreign investment into Canada. Same thing goes for the UK, same thing goes for Mexico. So it's a series of reciprocity and aligning of the regimes. So let us just think about what's happened recently. Now, many in the room, if you follow the mining space in Canada, will know that Zijin Mine, famous miner in China, his acquisition of a copper gold property in South America was blocked. Zijin is bringing the government of Canada to court to challenge that decision on jurisdictional basis. But at the same time, and maybe perplexing for people, is Jiangxi Copper invested $200 million in First Quantum, has an offtake agreement, a board seat. Why can they do it and Zijin can't? It has a lot to do with the fact that Zijin's investment came following its initial investment prior to all this focus on national security. So the government of Canada has said, not explicitly, but implicitly, that if you're in the game in Canada before a level of disharmony has arisen, you can protect your investment, you can maintain your investment. In fact, if you have a client or you're a company that's already invested in Canada with Investment Canada approval, you can marry that approval to further acquisitions in the same space. So you're in a very favorable position. But I just wanted to explain, I get questioned, why did Jiangxi able to invest but not Zijin? So I just wanted to, and of course, Jiangxi is an SOE. Now, I'm not going to go through all the law, but I want to provide a few practical pieces of advice. Because in the meetings that we've had so far in Shanghai, when we talk about capital markets, there's always a discussion about, I want to expand my Chinese business in Southeast Asia or in Canada or in the US. So the conversations come together. So we're here today to help you achieve, both goals. So like anything, it's planning ahead and making sure that the national security consideration, it's not boilerplate in a transaction agreement. It's a big part of any transaction, and you need to spend time and attention on it. Approval processes can run 6 to 12 months. I know you don't want to hear that, but that is the fact of life. In Canada, and this is very, very important, one takeaway. In Canada, we do regulate foreign investment that is greenfield. We do. The United States doesn't. So make sure that you keep that in mind when you're coming to Canada. Now, having said that, I would say that most greenfield investments bringing Chinese technology to service a North American market, to improve our supply chain, are going to be very favorably looked at, right? Now, there may be some data security issues, but it's not the sort of transaction where there's an acquisition of technology and a movement of it from North America or Canada. So greenfield, improving supply chains, important. If you're going to have that sort of transaction, it's also important to think about a feasibility study for the business. Like, why is the business coming to Canada? Who are you going to employ? Back to my net benefits. What's the purpose of the business? Is it going to help or hinder Canada? So these are the things you need to think about in planning for outbound investment into our country. I mentioned in the context of Jiangxi, some safe harbors. Like there's safe harbors for investments that are maintaining a current investment. There's safe harbors around commercial agreements. Investment Canada regulates the acquisition of assets or shares. Doesn't regulate a loan agreement, a license agreement, or anything like that. So when you think about commercial transactions in the North American market, think narrow. And as LQ said, think minority, because I'll come to that, because that's another safe harbor. You need to be prepared to present your case through counsel, right? In Canada. So moving on. Sorry. There we go. So again, this theme of minority investment on the far left-hand side, generally under 20% without a board seat is considered safe. A board seat that might come later in a process is probably safe as well. It's the bundling of the 20% with a board seat and the right to stay on the board that can be problematic. The next point I wanted to make was, sorry. I thought this was an interesting title. It's by way of background, when I used to come to China and bring Canadian clients here, people say, Stephen, you got to imbue Chinese characteristics into those clients so they feel more comfortable. You got to hand the cards. It's the decorum. But now we're turning the tables and we're talking about imbuing North American characteristics in Chinese clients. So they are acting on a global platform. They're global. They're bringing not a hand-picked director from their organization to be a director in Canada, but they're building their board with real directors that have experience in the business. That's important. That's a central part of bringing Canadian characteristics forward. And all these points here, this is why Canada ties into the US. You remember Christine said risk mitigation agreements, national security agreements. These are all the things that go into an agreement that will get to a yes, which this is all about. So independent directors, code of conduct, adherence to export control laws, privacy standards. We've all know about the TikTok server. Where's the server, right? Don't know where this is. But it's important that the server for the data stay in Canada. Listings on stock exchanges is very important because that's clear evidence that the business is going to act in a commercial way. So that's super, super important. Ring fencing sensitive information and providing a means for reporting to the government on the activities of the business. So these are the list of risk mitigation strategies, doing Canadian characteristics that we hope will get to a yes on your transaction. Thank you.